So I am Brent Braun, and welcome to Capping the Spread. For those that you all don't know what a deck cap is, a deck cap is a way to return a card from palm to the top of the deck secretly. It can be done with a single card or multiple cards to either add gimmicks in or to add cards in, usually from one to several cards. Sometimes a full deck can even be capped in, but the idea is to put a card on top of the deck invisibly. What we're going to talk about today is my version of capping the spread. That means we're going to cap the deck from a tabled spread. I've seen lots of people cap the deck, and rarely has it ever fooled me. We're going to talk about why it hasn't fooled me. We're going to talk about some ways to change that, and then I'm going to show you the deck cap that I've been using for 15 years that fools most of the magicians that see it. Not because it's technically difficult, but because it has this nice timing that just makes it work well. So I hope you guys enjoy the move. Let's get into it now. Again, capping the deck is the process of adding cards back to the deck that's been shuffled or that's been in use before. So you can use it to add gimmicks and to add other things. Today, just for an easy demonstration, we're going to talk about capping 4 aces onto the deck. So we're going to add the 4 aces to the top of the deck after the spectator is shuffled. That will allow us to cut to the 4 aces even though it's been shuffled by a spectator. Capping the deck is, again, the idea of hiding the aces in your hand and then secretly sneaking them on top of the deck when nobody's looking. A lot of people ask how you get the aces out of the deck. For this demonstration, when I start, I usually just start with the aces out of the deck. So before we start, I start with the aces in my lap. We'll talk about how to get them there and how to hold them there in just a bit. But the aces are in my lap, and whenever I'm ready, I get the aces into full palm, and then as I come out, I add them onto the deck. So a traditional deck cap has never fooled me, and let's talk about why. When these cards are in full palm, and my hand comes forward to pick up the deck, my hand has to sort of come down in this strange way and then come back up. It essentially has to make those aces kiss the top of the deck and then come back up. When it does that, it's very clear to anyone watching that the entire deck has gone out of your view. So the first thing you do when you palm the cards from your lap is that you don't palm them in traditional full palm. You're going to palm them in gambler's flat palm. We'll take a look at this from behind in a moment, but essentially it's the base of the pinky and the base of the thumb held down here. So they're still hidden by the meat of your hand. So now when my hand lays flat on the table, my hand can be much flatter than it can be in a traditional palm. So it gives me this much nicer look when I'm here. So now when I add these cards on top of the deck, I don't have to come all the way down. My fingers don't have to curl and come in. I just smack the top and then come up. A couple of subtleties there. I think we should also talk about full palm is that there is this idea that instead of coming down and kissing the deck before you come back up, some people drop from full palm on top of the deck as they do this sort of spidering action. So we're here as we come forward, we drop and spider the hand. Now that was an exaggerated spider motion. I'll show you what that would actually look like in real time. We're here, I come forward, I spider the deck and come up. The problem with that is it will have a tendency to flash on this side because those cards are actually falling out of palm as you come up. So you have to be very careful with that technique, which is why, again, we don't advise it. I really never advise adding cards at the table back on top from a full palm. We really want to use that gambler's flat palm, which is here. It's also easier to get cards out of the lap into gambler's flat palm. Again, we'll discuss that in just a moment. So these cards are in gambler's flat palm. I bring my hand over top, then I come up and pick the cards up. That's what it looks like to cap from gambler's flat palm. But now we want to work on some of the finesse. One of the finesses is that this deck wouldn't be squared. Because now when these cards fall off the top, if they don't land square, it doesn't matter, right? You're sort of hiding that splash with the rest of it. If you have an unsquared deck, or if you have a squared deck, I mean, and you add these cards on top and they come out unsquared, that looks bad. If these are already unsquared and in a mess, then when I come forward to add these cards on, it sort of doesn't look as bad. So that's the first thing you can do is you want an unsquared deck. The other thing that happens, as you come forward, as soon as your hand gets on top of the cards and you feel the back of those cards hit, you curl in your first finger and pick the deck up with your first finger on top. That makes it seem like the top of the deck never leaves your sight. So as you're here, you come forward and you get that sort of retention of vision on this edge of the deck. We're not going to be using any of this in the deck cap I'm going to teach you. I just want you to understand that these are some techniques that you should know about, because we are going to apply all these techniques in a way where you don't have to worry about any of them flashing, because timing's just going to cover all that. So again, we're here, I come forward, my finger comes up, and then I get to there. The other important thing I think is to get the deck out of that right hand as soon as possible so that it looks like you sort of didn't, what you don't want is this and then move it over. You want it to seem like it barely touched the right hand, like you just reached forward, picked up the deck and sort of tossed it into your left hand. And if you do all that properly, you're gonna end up with this sort of thing. This is unsquared on the table. We're in deck cap here, I do this, I toss that over there and we're ready to deal. So those are some of the deck caps that I hate. Those are the ones that I never use, the ones that I just don't think fool people, and they just never really fooled me in the real world. But that does lead into my spread cap, and I'll show you what the spread cap looks like now, and then we'll talk about what's happening. So those are all the things I've never liked about a deck cap and about adding cards to the deck. So let's talk about what I do like and what I'm currently using, what we're really talking about here, that I think is very deceptive. I've used it to fool magicians for years, and it really is sort of a nice move. The other thing is, what would you use capping the deck for? One thing you would use it for is just to cut to the 4 aces from a shuffled deck of cards. So that's going to be the basic thing I'll teach you now. We'll talk about some other things you can do with it later, but the basic thing would be able to get these aces added to the top of the deck from a shuffled deck of cards. Let me show you what that looks like. So we're in this position, the spectator shuffles the cards. These are, again, legitimate, genuine shuffles. I'm not doing any controls here. These really are shuffles. Once these cards are shuffled, I take the cards back. As soon as I take the cards back, I sort of relax because I want this whole relax thing. So I take the cards back, I spread them on the table, I've relaxed, and I just say, now obviously that leaves the aces in 4 different places. My goal is to try to find them from the shuffled deck. And that's 1, that's 2, that's 3, that's 4. That's the deck cap, right? So that's what it looks like in real time and in real speed. You know what to look for. You knew what to look for. I don't know if it got past you there, but in the real life, in the real time, it gets past everybody there. So all that's happening is, how do you get the 4 aces to your lap? That's the first question people ask all the time. You can palm them out and put them there. I usually just start with them there. So as soon as I hand the deck of cards out to be shuffled, at some point I've just dropped the aces into my lap. Those aces are now in the holdout. We'll talk about how I'm controlling them in my lap, and we'll show you that holdout in just a moment. Those are now held out there. Remember, I'm coming out in Gambler's flat palm. I'm coming out this way, not in full palm. The other reason is because when I have to pick these up from my lap, to get them in full palm is complicated. I have to do a lot of work. To get them into flat palm is super easy because all I have to do is make contact with those front 2 corners. Those front 2 corners just get clipped. I don't have to get the whole thing in. So we'll talk about that in a minute, but these are clipped here in this position. The deck of cards is shuffled. I spread the deck of cards from left to right. And now I sort of relax. Again, that's the important part, is as soon as you take the cards back, you sort of relax. And you see, now obviously, the other thing is important is you don't just put your hands into your lap to get cards and come back out. You need them comfortable with the idea that you're comfortable just talking to them with your hands in your lap, and that it's not a big deal. There's nothing to be worried about with my hands in my lap. I'm completely comfortable here. So while they're shuffling, I'll keep my hands in my lap, I'll look around, I'll bring them out. I'll just be prepared to, again, very casual, because we want them to not be, thinking about the fact that our hands went into our lap. So as soon as I'm here, I just relax and get comfortable, and then I just sort of gesture my hands up. I come forward with my hands empty, so they see this, and I say, now obviously that leaves the aces in random spots. My goal is to try to find them. And right now I've got those cards in full palm. As I start to pick this up, the moment that my left hand starts to move, my right hand comes up, drops those cards, turns up sideways, and then this gets pulled back to the middle. That's the cap. Now let's talk about a couple of things that don't happen. When these cards get added to the top, because this deck is spread, it's sort of working like the unsquared condition of the deck we said earlier. So if I add these cards and it goes from looking like this to looking like that, they can't tell the difference, right? So as I come up, my thumb, which is holding that card, just clicks off and lets those cards fall, and then my hand turns up onto its side. What I don't want to do is leave my hand there and make it look like I've snuck those cards on top. What's nice about this deck cap is it's one of the few where the spectator will remember that they saw the top of the deck the entire time. It looks like the top of the deck never left your sight, which is important. But that happens because all we do is put the cards down. While they're looking here, we put the cards down, and then we immediately open that hand up to sort of use as a backstop. We're not pushing down on it, we're using it just as a backstop so we can get that back into this hand and square it up as soon as possible. So we're in this position. These are here. My job is to try to find the aces. And now we're out and ready to go. And it sort of feels like a top change, just the relaxation and the tension and those sorts of things. So I'm sort of relaxed, I come forward, then I come back, and then I pick those cards up. So once you start to do it a couple times, you sort of get the feel for it, and I think that'll work well for you. So as I discussed earlier, there's this interesting thing that's happening here. Because the deck is spread, it's never going to look like I cover the top of the deck, right? We're spreading that left to right, and it's never going to look like I cover the top of the deck. All we're going to do is come out with these cards added. We're going to come straight forward as we've started to move this direction. As soon as we get here, all the thumb does, the thumb of the right hand just loosens, and that pops right off, right? Just drops that 4-card packet there. And as soon as it drops, it sort of opens up on its side. Now, because those cards are spread, even if it's not in exact alignment with the other cards, everyone's looking over here because all attention is drawn there, and by the time they look up, it's just there. So then I scoop those out, thumb goes on top, and brings that packet here. So let me show you what that looks like in real time from the worst angle. Right now you're sort of at the worst angle, and I'll show you what that looks like in real time. So as we're here, I do this, and it's just out and done. But the illusion we're trying to create is that this right hand never covers the top of the deck, that there's never a moment that it really touches much of the deck, right? We're trying to create the illusion that that hand just comes and sits down here. We want them to remember we just did this to get those cards clearing out. So just to run through this one more time quickly so you can sort of see what happens. The spectator has shuffled these cards. These really are genuinely shuffled. I have no idea where the aces are at. I take the cards back, I spread them onto the table, I relax for a moment, I go, now obviously with those aces shuffled like that, they're back in random spots of the deck. There's no way I can know where they're at, but my goal is to try to find them, and that's it. That's all 4 aces added right back to the top of the deck. So earlier we talked about how you could use this to control the 4 aces. You can also do it with a single card, so that if you wanted to control a selected card, it's a really nice way to be able to pass out the deck of cards and let it shuffled, and then add that card back on so that you can find it without looking through it and those sorts of things. So there's some really, really nice things that you can do with that. You can also use it to add gimmicks and those sort of things. But the question then becomes how you get the card out of the deck. Let's talk about a couple of ways to get the card out of the deck. Let's just say a spectator has selected the card. This is the card they've selected. Go ahead, show it around to everyone. While they're showing it around everyone, it's the 10 of diamonds. I say here, look, we're going to return the 10 of diamonds to the deck. I'm just going to give cut small packets like this onto the table. You say stop anytime you want. They say stop here. You say, look, we'll take the 10 of diamonds, we'll put it right back there. We'll put those cards in the middle of these cards, and then we'll just mix these cards up like this. Then when I get to here, I say, hey, do you know how to shuffle those cards? Go ahead and give those a shuffle. And they start to shuffle the cards. At the moment they're shuffling the cards, I'm already done in the holdout, so they can really mix these and shuffle these cards as much as they want. I already have the 10 out of the deck and ready to come back in anytime I want. So the fun thing about here too is if I've got a group of people, I can say, oh, you know here to shuffle, here, shuffle these and shuffle these. And I give everyone a small group of cards, and then everyone starts to shuffle them, right? So it's this crazy, chaotic thing, but as soon as I get those cards back, I can get the 10 of diamonds in control because the 10 of diamonds has been in my lap the entire time. So then once I do that, I have somebody square up all the cards, I take the cards back, and I say, now you picked one of these cards. The goal is for me to try to figure out which one. You remember what card it was, right? Good, I'll try to find it. Was it the 10 of diamonds? Yeah, so that's the idea. And obviously you wouldn't use that as the trick, but you've been able to control that card so that you can then put it in any position or do any traditional find a card trick that you want. So let's talk about what this control is. It's pretty smart, it's pretty fun. There are a couple of things going on here. If you're familiar with the bluff pass, you can find this in Card College. The bluff pass is the idea that I'm going to riffle my thumb down the edge of the deck. The spectator says stop, and when I come over and seemingly pick up that whole packet, looks like I pick up the whole packet, but in reality what I do is pick up a single top card. Now from the front that will look just like I picked up at that gap, but I've let everything fall. They think there's half a deck here, there's really a single card, and now we're in that position, right? That's what it looks like. Now, there are some angle issues and you can cover those with your arms and there's some things that you can do, but for me it's always seemed a little heavy-handed. When you do it on the table it becomes really deceptive, and there's a couple of reasons why. Let's talk about what's happening here. The 10 of diamonds has been selected. I'm riffling with my thumb and just taking off small packets of cards. I'm spreading those cards, not really wide. On the third one, when they say stop, I take a block of cards, 10 or 12 cards, I lay them on top of that packet, but I don't spread them. That's important because that's going to give us this deceptive thing that happens in just a moment. I say, look, we'll put your card right back here. The 10 of diamonds goes there. We'll put those cards in the middle of these cards. And now I'm going to do the bluff pass. So there's only a single card here. They see me riffle down. They see me pick up those 10 or 12 cards. It's actually only a single card I've picked up. Now I move forward, and all I have to do to cover this is tip this sideways this way, and even from the bad angle now, since it's only supposed to represent 10 or 12 cards, even from that bad angle, it still looks like it could be representing those 10 or 12 cards. So if I tip it at that angle, and as soon as I get here and push and spread, I get this really wide spread. When I get to here, I take this card and down jog it because that's my cover card I want to burn. Now right now, the 10 is already here, but everyone thinks it's around in here somewhere. So then I take these cards and say, as a matter of fact, do you know how to shuffle? I push this cover card off. And now as I start to push all these cards towards them, my hand goes flat down on top of the 10. I push those cards in, my hand comes back to the edge of the table. As soon as they start to take the cards, this hand's gonna go south off the edge of the table and take the 10 with it. Then it just gets pushed straight into my holdout. It's in the holdout now, and we're ready to go. So let's do that face up one more time so we can follow what happens. What's really interesting about this move is that you're able to palm a card very easily because the spectator doesn't know where it's at. or they think they know where it's at. That's what's even better. It's not like it's lost in the deck. They think they know about where it's at, which is why it fools them. So when I put the 10 of diamonds back here, and I take a block of cards, again, remember those are not spread. That's a block. I pretend to take a block of cards. I'm taking a single card and spread. Right now, everyone thinks the 10 is around here somewhere. No one believes that the 10 can be all the way over here. And if they believe the 10 is there, as soon as I start to do this, they're convinced that it's there. At some point, I just kick that card over, put my hand literally, all I'm doing, it's not a fancy palm, right? It's just me taking the base of my thumb, pushing down with it. If you're familiar with my kickback transposition, the 2-card transposition I teach, it uses this exact same technique. If you're not, you should check that out at penguinmagic.com. You can check it out on my DVD, Decks and Deceptions. But it's exactly the same thing. I'm just rolling this hand over onto that card, and then I move forward before I come out, right? Then I come to the edge of the table. As soon as they start to take those cards, again, this card's just gonna go straight down into my lap. When it gets into my lap, it goes into the holdout, and I'm ready to go. So let's do that face up so you can actually see what's going on. We'll talk about, a lot of people wonder how you grab just that single card during that moment. So when I'm here, you say stop, I put this packet here. Grabbing this single card just takes a practice. But really what's happening, the easiest way to think of it is my fingers are spread like a wedge. So think about making a V with my thumb and my finger. And if I just hit, that V sort of just locks just that top card in automatically. It's like hitting the V and it's getting wedged in. I'm not really picking it up. Now, eventually it's gonna look like I'm picking it up. My fingers are really gonna curl. I'm not gonna stay in this weird V status. But when you do that, it's just gonna lock that single card in so that as you come up, it's gonna just, it just automatically does it. It's just automatically taking just a single card. It's a little bit of finesse and it takes a little bit of practice, but it's not too difficult. So now we're in this position, the 10 goes there. Normally face down, obviously. Say, look, we'll take that packet, we'll put it in the middle of this packet, we spread out, we down jog that card. And we do all that in one beat. We don't spread and then come back and down jog that card. As we're spreading, we spread and then we down jog that card. Now we say, as a matter of fact, we'll take these cards and put them into these cards, make this a mess. I'm doing exactly the same thing I talked about. That goes into there, this pushes everything forward for them to shuffle, this comes back when it gets to the edge of the table, this goes down and south, and then goes directly into the holdout. So that's a way that you can get the 10 of diamonds into the holdout. Now the 10 of diamonds is into the holdout. Again, everyone's shuffled. They know that it's lost. They know I don't have control over it. And then when I come back, I spread the deck, and I'm just going to do the cap the deck. So I say, now obviously your 10's lost somewhere in the middle of the deck. My job is to try to find it, and you're done. So this is another cool little trick that you can do with it that has a nice little clever moment at the end that I think you'll enjoy. Again, I've been using this for years to fool magicians because it's got this one little clever moment that gets past them and just sort of destroys them, which I really like. So the idea is that the deck of cards is shuffled by the spectator. You take the deck of cards back, you say, from the shuffled deck of cards, my job is to try to find the ladies. We'll see if that works. The idea is that I take the deck of cards that you shuffled, I just give them a little cut like this, any false cut you want, and then you show that's 1, that's 2, that's 3, that's all 4 queens. So you found all the queens, which is kind of good. We'll do that, let's do that one more time. We'll spread the cards out like this. The queens go into 4 random spots again. We'll push those queens back in. Now the idea is those look like random spots, but they're not so random. I actually know that there's 17, 14, and 9. Again, if I give these a little cut like this, I should be able to get 1, 2, 3, 4 queens. And the clever part about this whole thing is this: no extra queens anywhere in the deck. I hope that fooled you. It's a really fun moment, really gets past magicians, especially when I get to this point and I spread and show that there are no additional queens inside of the deck. Those really are the 4 queens from this deck. So what's really clever about this is you get to cut to the aces or the queens from a shuffled deck of cards twice, which is sort of fun, and then it has that moment where at the end the queens vanish. That works because these queens are gimmicked. These are the first 4 queens that I cut to, and they're gimmicked on the face. These are gimmicked with a plasti spray. What I'm actually using is Rust-Oleum Flexi Dip. You just do a light spray to the faces of these cards, and now their cards are, they're not tacky, but they're rubberized, so they work like a non-slip mat. So you can use this to make a queen vanish. If I put one of these queens into the center of these cards and I spread them, you'll notice that the queen just goes away. So we're going to use that attribute at the end of the trick to make the 4 queens that got pressed into the deck go away. But that section is really smart and clever because it really sort of builds into a magician's mind that you really are cutting to the 4 queens. I should also mention the cuts that I'm doing here aren't the cuts that you would do. Do fancy cuts and an individual cut for every queen. Don't just cut once or do one false cut and take all 4 out on the top. If you can do some riffle shuffle work, you can do that. You know, the fancier you make it look, the more credit you'll get for it. I do this a lot, and a lot of magicians then think that I'm using, you know, some stripper deck technology or some very difficult stuff, but I'm doing all of this with only one move and not a lot of work. So remember, each and every one of these queens has been rubberized on the face. The other thing that I have is 4 duplicate queens. So all of these cards are going to go into my lap in the holdout. We'll talk a little bit about that again in a moment. The first set goes into the holdout. The second set goes on top of those in a different way. That's now all held out on my lap. Now, I'm ready to shuffle these cards, hand them out to be shuffled, let the spectators do whatever they want. Right now, this deck is 4 cards shy, and at the end of the trick, it's going to be 4 cards heavy. If you're concerned about that, you shouldn't be, but if you are concerned about that, all you do is hand out 2 packets to 2 separate spectators and let them each shuffle the cards, then trade, then let them shuffle them together, right? That way they don't spend a lot of time with those cards in their hands. But the truth is the difference between 4 cards and you know, a 48 card deck and a 52 card deck is almost impossible for lay people to tell the difference. It really is hard. But if you are concerned about that, the way to cover that is to just cut it into 2 packets and let those 2 people shuffle that up. These 2 packets come back. As they come back, I spread. Now I'm just going to cap the deck. So this is the traditional deck cap. I now have the 4 cards in my hand ready to come out. Those are the cards that are plastic dipped on the face. So those cards have rubberized on the face of the queens. So I do this. I just say they're lost somewhere in the middle. My goal is to try to find them. I do exactly the same cap we've learned. It's now in position here. Now I do whatever sort of running up shuffles that I want to do. I do a couple fancy cuts, anything that I want, any false cut that I want. And then I turn over a single card and it's a queen. Now it's important that you don't really want to deal these cards, and if you do, it just takes a light touch to push one of them over. I usually prefer to do cuts, because then as I smack it down, it just makes sense to pop one off and turn it over. If you start to press, you'll get 2 to come off at the same time, and there's this little fight. You can finesse it and do it soft enough, it just takes a little bit of work, but that's just a thing to know. When these are all 4 together, they do have a tendency to create that problem, right? So you just do this, that's going to be a problem. I've got 2 of them. So instead, I do a false cut. Then I pop a single card off and turn it over. Now that I have 1 card, it's no longer going to be that much of an issue, but I do the same thing. That's all 4 queens. Now I'm going to cap the deck from the spread, but what's clever about this is that the spread is happening to get rid of the queens and then instantly getting the queens to the top as I put the spread back together. So as I put the 4 queens back into different positions of the deck, these really do go in, because remember, they're plastic dipped in here. Now I'm going to push the queens in, drop my hands to my lap for just a moment, and then I sort of look back and relax, and I go, yeah, I think 19, 7, 11, and 12. That should be it, right? Whatever. I'm just making up numbers to make it seem like I know where the queens are. Then I've done that. Now I can cut these cards, exactly the same thing we've done earlier, because those 4 queens are exactly the same place that they've been. That's 1, that's 2, that's 3, that's all 4. But this is the part that gets those magicians. As soon as you turn this over, and I don't say no extra queens, I just turn this over and go, so that's cutting to the queens. And I just do this and sit and wait. And you wait for a moment, your spectators will very quickly realize there are no extra queens in the deck, and they'll be as fooled as you are, I hope. So this is another variation of the find the queens trick that I think is sort of fun. Again, we have the 4 queens that are plastic dipped on the face. Instead of putting 8 of them in the holdout, we're just going to put 4 of them in the holdout. Those are the regular queens. Those go into the holdout on my lap before we start. The other ones are on the deck. Those are face down all together. Because what we're going to do is create a block of 4 cards that, because they're sticky on the face, they'll become sort of a thick card, but they'll also stay together. As long as you ask the spectator if they shuffle cards like this and if they can overhand shuffle. When they overhand shuffle, those queens will stay together as a block. So now when you take the card back, you're going to do the same thing you did earlier. You're going to spread the deck as if doing the same trick. But as you spread, I don't know if you guys can see this on camera, I see a giant block and I feel it with my fingers. I know all 4 queens are right there together. But now I can find them without having to cap the deck. So this time I can be very free about it. I do exactly the same gestures. Look, the queens are left somewhere in the deck. I'm going to try to find them. As I go to scoop this up, all I have to do is hit that packet, down jog, and now when I pick that up, I'm going to be able to cut those queens back to the top of the deck. So we'll do that again, and I'll show you what that looks like in real time. We're here, that block of 4 queens. As I'm here, all I'm going to do is hit this card and pull it down, so now I can pick up on that in jog cut all 4 queens back to the top of the deck so that I'm ready to find the queens. Then I do the cuts, the sequences we talked about earlier, then I show that's 1, that's 2, that's 3, that's 4. Now I really have cut to the 4 queens from a shuffled deck, and I've done that without a lot of skill. There's no stripper deck, there's no like skill at all, because when you spread these cards, you literally feel this giant thump. As you spread those, you'll just feel a thump, like a speed bump halfway through the spread, which is pretty clever. And as I go to pick these up, if you don't want to down jog, you can just hit that card and move these to here and throw them on top, right? You know, nobody's gonna question it. Then they're here, I give them a couple of cuts. Every cut I happen to get a queen, right? I got a little lucky on that one. We'll do it again. That's queen number 2, that's queen number 3, that's queen number 4. Right? Now we're gonna go into the extra phase. We're gonna do exactly what we've done earlier, but we're gonna cap the deck this time. So we take the 4 queens, we put them back into different spots of the deck. Now we push them in, push them completely square and flush. The idea is that I've got to try to find the queens. As I do this, I've got the cards out of the holdout. I'm back up to here. Now I'm ready to, again, shuffle the cards and find all 4 queens. So that's sort of a clever way to do it without having to cap the deck twice. It's nice to sort of mix up methods because it throws magicians off. You know, the very first time they see very cleanly that you didn't add any queens to the deck, so they're not looking the second time. They think you really can find the queens from a shuffled deck, so it just sneaks right past them pretty quickly. So one thing that can happen with the plasti dipped queens is that during the overhand shuffle, if you get a spectator who's sort of really aggressive, those cards could separate. So as long as they're overhand shuffling, they shouldn't separate. And when I spread them on the table, I should immediately feel that sort of speed bump of 4 cards. But let's say that that doesn't happen. Let's say that they are separated. So let me find them here again. There's all 4 queens there. So that's 1, that's 2, that's 3, that's 4. If they do get separated, they normally get separated into 2 separate pairs. So let me separate 2 pairs in here, and then we'll show you how you handle that situation. 2 pairs, you'll still feel like a speed bump. You'll just immediately know that it's not as big as the normal speed bump. So when I'm spreading these cards, my first finger's on the edge of the deck, and I feel the first one there, I felt it thump, and then I feel the other one over here. So now that I know where the first one's at, all I'm going to do is just worry about getting them 2 at a time now. So I'm going to change the trick a little bit. As I scoop those up, I cut 2 queens to the top, not worrying about where the other 2 queens are yet. Then I produce the first one and the second one. I give the deck a false cut, a couple more false cuts. I spread them again on the table, and now I just felt the second 2 queens there. So now I go back and I say, now the queens are still lost in the middle here somewhere. Let me see if I can find the other 2 for you. Then I do my false cuts, my false shuffles, and then I show the other 2 queens are there. So if they do come apart, and it will happen sometimes, you're still always able to feel them, because no matter what, even 1 queen is still going to be 2 cards thick, so you can just feel it bounce right off your thumb or off your finger as your finger spreads them. Even 1 queen is stuck to another card, so it is still a thick card, and with a little bit of practice you can spread that and know exactly where that queen's at, and I'm able to cut to it. So here's, I mentioned earlier the idea of being able to add gaffs to the deck. What's really clever about adding the gaffs is there's this great moment that's sort of built into the routine. The other thing that I talked about is the move sort of feels like a top change, and a top change is really based on sort of relaxation and tension. So you make a joke, everybody laughs, and then that downbeat you do the move and it flies past people. So we're using that sort of relaxation and tension, but this is a moment that has that relaxation and tension built into it automatically, and this is probably the easiest way to do this deck cap. I promise if you start practicing this way, you're absolutely never going to get caught with it, because no one is watching at all. Like, you'll feel bad. You'll be like, I wish they would watch what I'm doing, because it's just so deceptive and happens at the right moment. And it happens at the right moment because I've got some gaffs in my holdout I'm going to add in just a moment. I spread the deck of cards, just like I always have, but now I say, do me a favor, take out any card you want. They slide out that card. As they slide out the card, everyone is relaxed. My hands come down to my lap. No one's paying attention at all. As they go, I go ahead and look at it, show it around. By the time they look back, the gaffs are in and we're ready to go, right? It's the perfect moment to do this because they're showing it all around, and when they look back, it looks like the deck's just squared on the table. Nobody has any idea that I added a double backer, right? Or that I added a blank face or a red back, or that I added a joker. You can add in as many cards as you want in that scenario, which is sort of super fun. The other thing to think about there also, which is fun, is if you're going to add a red backer, you would normally think you can't add a red backed card because when you cap the deck, you're going to get a color change, right? So as you're here, you come up, you get a color change there, that's probably bad. Here's a really clever way to handle that. If you need to add an odd backer, all you do is put 1 additional card with it. 1 card that came from the deck squared, both those go into the holdout, now you have a covered card. So now you're able to add that odd-backed card, and they won't see it get added at all. So it's now out of the holdout, it's ready to go. I come up, it's all squared and face down on the table. You can do the same thing to add a card that's face up. Say for instance, you want to add a card that's face up for the end of the trick. This goes into the holdout. Again, you can do the same thing. This is here. It's in the holdout, ready to go. I lift this up, I square it back, and now you never saw that face up card, but it's in ready to go and play. Speaking of that same thing, you can add it face up to the face of the deck. Okay, because all you're going to do is, as you add it, you're going to square the deck up on its side this way and turn it face down. So if you did want to add a red-backed card to a blue deck, but you didn't want to have the extra buffer card, these cards are blue. In the holdout is a red card, face up. Instead of spreading them face down, I spread them face up. I get here and I say, now I need a very specific card for this trick. Oh yeah, I think it's in there, it's gonna be fine. And then I turn this over this way, okay? So you're doing exactly the same thing, but at the moment you get your hand there, the deck is going to turn up here as it comes to the center of the table and then gets turned face down. So now they've never seen that I've added a red card. So that's a really clever, fun way to start a trick like even Red Hot Mama, that sort of trick, because after they've shuffled, you know, you're doing tricks, I'm doing tricks all night, I wanna do Red Hot Mama, I have to add a card. This is a really clever way to be here. I'm ready to take the card out and to go in. I just say, here, let me show you a trick. Here, take out any card you want, perfect. We're gonna try an experiment. I'll mark it on the back here. You throw it in here, and now you're off and doing Red Hot Mama. One, you know, Chicago Opener, sometimes it's called. One card has changed color. I know that sounds, you know, that's the trick and that's it. So that's some ideas on how to get multiple cards in and out. But remember, we can use extra cards as cover cards to get face in, to get face out, to get red backs, to get blue backs, to do a lot of different things. So I hope that makes sense. Again, if you guys have any questions, reach out and let me know. I'd love to hear what you're doing with it. So I've been talking a lot about the holdout in my lap, and the problem is if you try to hold four aces just sitting, or even a single card, just sitting on your lap here, it's going to have a tendency, if you move or shift at all, it's going to have a tendency to hold you in place and make you feel very rigid, or it's going to have a tendency to fall off and land on the floor, both of which are very bad. So the holdout that I'm using is an old gambler's technique. I just call it the pant fold holdout. It's really not that fancy. All I do is take my fingers, my hand, I hold them in my leg here, I pinch my fabric, and then I tuck my fingers up underneath and then fold them back down and smooth that out. So now there is a noticeable fold in my pant leg, for me, because I can feel it, but it creates a pocket here about 2 inches wide is what you want. Now when cards go into that, they literally slide in that like a pocket, and they're almost completely hidden. What that means is they're not sitting on my lap. As I talked about earlier, because this feels like a top change, you want to make sure you're relaxed and comfortable and you can move around and be comfortable everywhere that you're at. And in order to do that, you want to be able to have those cards in the holdout and know that they're not going to fall out. If they were just balanced there, you'd have to be a little nervous and a little concerned. This just gives me more freedom of movement, and I don't have to have any fear at all. Right now, I'm pushed away from the table. Normally, I would be scooted up to the table further. That would obviously be hiding those cards, and we'll talk about some clever ways to hide that in just a moment. But they're just there. Now, as I mentioned earlier, because of the gambler's flat palm, these two corners, because the roundness of my leg, these two corners are up off of my leg. If I were to try to get these cards in classic and full palm, I have to move them up here, then I have to sort of straddle grip them and reposition them, which is a lot of work. What's great about this is all I have to do is come down with my hand, hit my pinky, base of my pinky there, base of my thumb here, slide my hand forward that 2 inches, or the pocket's 2 inches, but really I just put them in there far enough to secure them. So in this place, it's maybe 1/2 or 3/4 of an inch. So all I need to do is hit this, move that 3/4 of an inch forward, and now I'm sort of done and out, and these are ready to be added. Now these will come straight up and be added into the packet. So again, that's folded over and held here. We're ready to come here, push these out, and I'm ready to add them. Now, what's cool about that is in the trick we did earlier, we did, instead of 4 aces, we did the 4 queens, and we did 8 cards held out. So because these are held out here, I can take the second packet and turn it at an angle there. And now I can do exactly the same thing. I just pivot my hand a little bit, and I can take out just that packet. I can then add that to the deck, then come back down and get the second packet, and then add that second to the packet to the deck as well. So that's what's happening. That's the pant leg fold out, or the pant leg holdout, as we would call it. Let's talk about a couple of things that happen in the pant leg. The reason you don't want these cards in too deep is you don't want to have to bring your hands forward too much. You don't want that arm sort of moving in and out. And remember, this is also happening in the part of the routine where they're not paying much attention. But the less distance you have to make it, the better it is. My favorite thing to do is to get the cards into the clip and then to move my body back, right? Because now it just looks like I'm relaxing and getting comfortable. I don't want my arm and my elbow to go. So in this situation, if I'm here but I move my body back, it moves everything away. Essentially, my hand stays in relative position, but the body moves away from the cards to get them into palm, ready to come up and be added in. I just think that's better than this moment where you push your hands around like this, right? Where you come down into your lap, and then for no reason, this elbow is seen to move forward just a little bit. Again, it doesn't matter. It's very subtle, but I just like it more that when I'm sort of relaxed and natural and I step back to here, I drop my hands into my lap, then I get these into this thing. Now I'm relaxed. As I move up, that's what gets those out of the holdout, right? So I'm moving my sort of butt away from the table. This isn't a rolly chair, so it's rolling. Normally the chair's not moving. It's just my posture that's moving, and that gets those out into the holdout there, right? So that is the way that you get in and out of the holdout. Let's talk about another thing. If you're doing this surrounded, you can run into some problems. Somebody might be able to see that in your lap, and that can be an issue. So when you're surrounded, all you do is tuck this leg into the center of your body and then sit closer to the edge of the table. Okay, so if I'm here and now I scoot in closer to the edge of the table, you can't see that knee at all because it's tucked in and towards my body. So I'm in that position while they're shuffling. While they're shuffling, when I come back, I drop my hands into my lap, and now when I scoot back, I'm now almost in that position here in my lap. Okay, so now I'm in a position where even if there's someone here now, they can't see it. So I can do this surrounded because I'm in this position. You guys have shuffled the cards. I'm talking to whoever's over here. That makes sense naturally for my legs to be pivoted. As I come back, I drop my hands into my lap. I pivot back to here. It's come out now, and then I'm ready to come up and add that. So that's just some ways that you can use it. I use this all the time, completely surrounded to get in and to get out of it. I'm pushed away from the table. As I push the cards into the holdout, I go forward. As I take them out, I come back out, and my hands are covering it. So again, just some things that you can play with, because there will be situations where maybe somebody walks up beside you or around the table while you're working, and you're concerned that you have those cards held out in your lap, and what are you going to do with it? Again, if you just scoot forward, tuck that knee in, and turn this way to address whoever's on your left side, it'll just cover all that. So I just wanted to show you a completely exposed view. The four aces are in the holdout back here. The deck is being shuffled by the spectator. Again, as the deck is shuffled, my hands are in my lap. If I'm concerned about people around me, they're also sort of covering up those cards just for coverage if I need, but I'm just relaxed and sitting here. I come forward, I take the cards back from the spectator, spread the cards onto the table. I then gesture so they see my hands empty. I say the idea is to try to find some cards that might be important in poker. I push my butt back so the cards are out of the holdout. Cards are now here. As soon as I scoop this up, the timing starts that as soon as that hand starts to move, this hand comes straight up, adds the cards, turns up, and drags it back to the middle of the table. So let me do that one more time just to make sure we're getting all that. I'll do it with the aces face up so you can follow along. Cards are in the holdout here. Cards are spread on the table. I say now obviously that leaves the aces in 4 separate spots. My goal is to try to find them. And that's what it looks like. So that is capping the deck from the spread. I hope you enjoy the move as much as I have. Like I mentioned in the tutorial, it feels sort of like a top change. So if you're not currently doing a top change, there's lots of literature out there that you can learn the top change. I learned it from Card College Volume 1. That's a great source to look up. You might want to start there just because that sort of helps you understand the body movement and the sort of relaxation and the tension that we're using to make this move fly by. So I hope you guys enjoy it. If you do, you can always send me an email. That's themagicfirm@gmail.com. Send me an email. Let me know about what you think about this. Also, if you love this work and you're using it in the real world, feel free to leave a review. That helps people know that you've enjoyed what you've seen, helps feed my kids, as I like to say, and I can't wait to see you in the real world. Thanks again for all your support.